Welcome to a Diamond Podcasting Productions original, The Shoot, a pro wrestling podcast with Dan Burke and Drew McKenzie.
Hi, everybody. We're here for a surprise. Yes, we're good with surprises here on the Diamond Podcasting Productions Network. However, if you're watching here on Spotify and Apple on Pro Wrestling World Talks, we're doing a little bit of a different episode this week. Of course, my co-host here on The Shoot, Mac, is joining me as usual. I am your host, Dale Burke, and I am also joined this week by my cat, Daria. She is on my lap for this episode, apparently. She has just cocked out. And I am joined by the princess of the household and the queen of the household. Welcome back to Pro Wrestling World Talks, and for her first official episode debut without her little cameos here on The Shoot, the wonderful, the vivacious, the sexy, the every good possible thing that could happen in my life, the wonderful Miss Stephanie.
Hello. I am cringing and blushing all at the same time.
Well, that's good. I have done my job in service. And Mac, thank you for coming on such short notice. This was all brought together yesterday by Stephanie, who made the idea of, hey, we were going to do the Pro Wrestling 101 kind of education stuff. Daria, stop going for my wire. Thank you. Stop. We're not doing this now.
Better that than something else.
You will have to leave. You will have to leave if you keep going. So
I kicked her out of my room. She was eating the freaking cord.
She's going for my headphones wire. It's like, you can't do this. I can't. I need this to work. I need this to pay bills that you don't pay. It's your cat. You don't do anything to help.
She's mad she's not booked.
She's mad she's not booked.
Because I'm not booked.
Exactly. This was all thrown together yesterday morning by the wonderful Stephanie, who came up with this idea of, hey, why don't you do something? We do this Pro Wrestling 101 thing, or we could bring back like Dark Side of the Ring. So, considering that the recent miniseries just concluded on Vice, on Who Killed WCW, I thought, hey, this is a perfect time to review everything all at once. And also, I get to torture Stephanie with the end of WCW.
And we get to torture everybody else because everybody else has already gone through this with us.
Everyone has already gone through this. But now Stephanie has to give her own opinion.
It was a hell of a ride, man. Hell of a ride. Let me just put it that way.
We are going to go through everything. But we are also everything from the very beginning to the sale of the company. When she found out about how much WWE paid, and she was like, what?
I could have bought WCW if I really wanted to.
We all could have bought WCW.
I was like, are you kidding me? Okay.
Yes. So, let's start off with some of the players. The first one I think we can go with is the executive vice president and also the executive producer that was brought in, and somebody that Stephanie really became a fan of, and also was the main reason why WCW rose to such heights that they did between 1996 and 1998. And I am talking, of course, about the controversial, but in my opinion, one of the most groundbreaking personalities in the history of professional wrestling, Eric Bischoff.
I like Eric. I just, in the first episode, you see him when he's like really young, and his face was so punchable. He had such a punchable face, but then I'm not realizing that the baby face guy that they're showing in the clips is the same guy that's being interviewed, because as he aged, he kind of just turned into a completely different looking person. But then as the series went on, you saw he got older and older, he started becoming less punchable for me.
Yes. To the fact that, which is so interesting, is the fact that Eric Bischoff Eric Bischoff, if you watched WCW at that point and you were watching the NWO angle, you would have absolutely detested the man, considering the fact that it turned out within the first, they didn't talk about it really much in Who Killed WCW, but Eric Bischoff at one point was a member of the NWO and was created. So he was the guy behind it, right? They did this within the first, I believe, 4 months. It happened, I think, in November, where Bischoff it was revealed that Bischoff was the person behind the NWO, which was funny because he pretty much was infiltrating his own company with these outsiders, so to speak. But also, they were somehow able to turn it around and make sense of it because of the fact that if you go back to 1994, the main reason why Hulk Hogan came to WCW was because of Eric Bischoff. And the audience had already not really accepted Hulk Hogan because when you're talking about the WCW audience, you're still talking about carryovers from Jim Crockett Promotions and everything that happened with the National Wrestling Alliance in the 1980s and the 70s. Ted Turner bought what was left of Jim Crockett Promotions in 1988, and they were horribly mismanaged up until the point that they brought Eric Bischoff in as executive producer. And Bischoff brings Hogan in 1994, and that's when WCW is finally starting to get their mainstream attention. They kind of floundered after the initial pickup of business with Hulk Hogan coming in. And then they start Nitro in 1995. That begins, of course, the Monday Night Wars, where WWE and WCW were kind of trading back and forth for the first 9 months or so. And then until Scott Hall crossed the barrier on Memorial Day of 1996, and the rest was history. So Bischoff pretty much had created all of this. Then he went on to become the first heel kind of, or bad guy authority figure in pro wrestling up until that point. And so unless you were a Jack Tunney fan in the 90s, because every time he made a decision, you were like, this asshole again? Yeah. I forgot what Jesse Ventura used to call him. He used to say, the president of Nicaragua.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. It was really hilarious. But so now with all that, you have this initial rise of WCW, the takeover from the NWO, Hulk Hogan going from beloved babyface to hated bad guy, not just in front of the camera. No, it's just, oh, he's hated backstage. Oh, now we hate him in real life. In front of the on camera too. Hogan, however, the backstory of him with the heel turn of the fact that he stayed at Kevin Sullivan's house the night before, because he still had people trying to talk him into not turning heel. I'm including probably Linda Hogan, which Stephanie threw in there. Like, why would Linda have a problem with it? Why? Well, of course, because she probably didn't want the money train to stop.
I'm like, this is okay. You know what? This isn't about Linda. I'm going to shut up. Continue.
Cornbread, damn it, cornbread.
Cornbread, exactly. So now we have in 1996 and 1997 into 1998, where WCW is dominating WWE. It is not even a question. And we look at the fact of they build this slow build from the start of the NWO in July of the official inception, because yes, the invasion angle started in May of 96, but then in July, that's when Hogan turns. And from that point, you have this long storyline that goes into a year and a half in. And then we start with the first real mortal wound, as Stephanie had put it to me. Was at Starrcade 97. Sting versus Hulk Hogan. The biggest match, the biggest pay-per-view, the highest buy-rated pay-per-view in WCW's history. And what did we get?
The referee. That fucking referee. Excuse my language. It just makes me so mad.
That's a bad word.
All he had to do was count to 3. That's
Well, he
all
did.
he had to do. No, but he didn't do it properly.
I mean,
It makes it even worse. He was supposed to do it quickly.
He did it properly. He did it properly. That was the problem. He was not supposed to do it properly.
Okay, but in 3 seconds, he just ruined a year and a half's worth of work and time and preparing, and he fucked it all up, that damn whatever he is, referee.
I actually want to go to some audio clips from you, actually, from this weekend. So, hold on.
What took WCW 1.5 years to figure out or plan out, that referee fucked it all up in 3 seconds. First culprit to start the death of WCW is the fucking referee. My final thoughts of episode 1. The referee is an asshole. He is the one who started the wound. And Dan's arguing with me, but just based on this episode, I feel like Hogan's ego could have been part of the demise as well. But we shall see, because we're now going to episode 2.
So let's talk about that real quick, because that's important, that last comment about Hogan, because part of the story to Nick Patrick's count, who was the referee, is the fact that he was told one thing by somebody and then was told something else by Hogan, apparently. Whether it's maybe do a fast count, maybe do a normal count, kind of mix messages in there maybe a little bit.
So how are you going to argue with me, Dan, that Hogan isn't part of it?
Hogan, so the beginning of the match, Hogan makes his entrance, and there is a time on camera that you see Hogan and Nick Patrick having a conversation. And if you think about it, that's common. We see that quite a bit, especially if a heel, he's taunting a referee. We've seen that for years over time. But if you think about that now, and you go back and you look at it, that's where the conversation probably happened. So he had in his one ear them telling him what they should do, but then you have the number one performer for the company, the highest paid guy, and the fact too that he had 2 words that guaranteed him the ability to sway decisions in his favor. Creative control.
That's a bad word.
Sorry, but it is. But go ahead.
It's true. For wrestlers, it is.
It is, yeah.
It is.
Well, Hogan's a perfect example as to why.
100%.
Because he made
Uh,
I would argue that Mercedes Moné is more so.
Yes.
But that's besides the point.
I don't know about all that, okay? But
It's
you know what I
Sasha
mean?
Banks.
watching,
Yeah.
all I can say is that watching this series in general has made me see how much of a selfish prick Hogan kind of is. I love Eric, and Booker T has a new fan because I love him. So those are my generalizations so far of the series.
Jeez.
I mean, it's without, it's not even a debate how selfish Hogan has been in his career. I think episode 2 does give him a little bit of credence, though, in the fact of that he had no problem doing a certain job to someone else that we'll talk about in a few moments, and had no problem doing it on live television on Monday night, where people did not really have to pay for it. And that, of course, was on Nitro to Goldberg in July of '98. Their thought process in that day was saying that Sting kind of didn't have the best of attitude going into that event. There is also a rumor, and I think that this has been stated, I believe, on 83 Weeks podcast between Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson. Conrad made ask the question that I think that a million of us have really wanted to ask over time: what the hell happened? And one of the answers that Eric Bischoff had given Conrad Thompson was Sting wasn't tan enough.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
What
the
does
thing.
that even
Yes,
mean?
that's a quote.
Like literally, like just because he
Not
didn't
tan.
have tan?
Yeah.
Not taking into the fact that for a year and a half, Sting was in the rafters of buildings like the Phantom of the fucking Opera. And they're
Like the
Their
crow.
I-
Like the crow.
with a crow, with an actual vulture at certain points.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crow. And
Yo, I
they're
thought that
sitting.
was so badass, by the way.
Was it?
with the
I mean,
with the
with
falcon or the whatever he
Yeah.
had some kind of predator bird.
Yes,
I thought that was sick.
it was. I mean, you said that you are because you didn't know Sting was. You didn't know Sting actually before Crow Sting. You didn't know that existed. You thought he was always Crow Sting because you saw
when I saw
Surfer Sting.
Yeah, is that what you call it? I call it colorful Sting.
I call it Surfer Sting.
Surfer
I call it
Sting.
No, I call him colorful Sting. I didn't like him as colorful Sting. I like him better as Crow Sting.
I like him as
Who ran?
Baran Sting. Baran Sting.
I like him as both. Joker Sting's good too, but
But that was later, though.
that was later on. But
was
Joker
later.
Sting was fun.
Yeah, no, it was. I agree.
So Sting is in the rafters. He's the Phantom of the Opera. But one of the answers that was given to not him winning clean at Starrcade 97 was he wasn't tan enough. Because he was in every rafters of the building, pretty much being the conscience of WCW in the rafters of the building, but he did not have a tan.
I have to say this comment, just because it's funny given the connotation of the tan. He's wearing fucking face paint.
Listen,
He's wearing fucking face paint.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. I'm like, but his character, he's wearing white, like he's what? He's not skin color at all. His face is like paper white. What are you talking about?
Yes. That was an excuse that was given up. There have been a few excuses over the years. The main one that seems to be the prevalent issue is that Hogan just looked at him and said, "Not today, brother." It's like, okay. Sting would then beat him. They did do a rematch at Super Brawl, where Sting beat him again, but that was under Macho Man interference. So Sting never got a clean victory over Hogan. If you don't count like Halloween Havoc 99, when Hogan just walked out of the ring and let him pin him. That was probably the most clean victory that Sting ever got on Hogan, at least in WCW. I think they fought again in Impact, if I'm not mistaken. But that was kind of that first year and a half, and that was Kevin Nash had mentioned it. Kevin Sullivan had mentioned it that that was a little while after was WrestleMania 14 when they brought in Mike Tyson, and the night after WrestleMania 14, Kevin Sullivan told Kevin Nash, "Do you feel the water yet? Because I think we just hit the iceberg." And that was in reference to Titanic was the biggest movie in the world at the time, but also the fact that they felt that it was over. The tide had already turned enough. So 98 was one of their biggest financial periods ever. The ratings kind of slipped at certain moments because that's when the tide kind of turned ratings wise, but financially, revenue wise, they were doing fantastic. I mean, we can go back to the end of 98. One of their biggest money makers was WCW NWO Revenge for the N64, which became one of the most iconic games for that system history. In Nintendo 64 history, WCW NWO Revenge is still one of the most talked about and beloved games in that library. And that came a little while after people felt that the tide was turning for WWE. And it's so interesting because none of us were really seeing it. Well, Steph wasn't because she wasn't watching. But between Mac and I, we really didn't have an idea because we looked at WCW like, well, they're doing all right. The business seems to be okay. Like the buildings are getting sold out and full. The video game is selling a bunch. What's going on here? But then by the end of 98, the beginning of 99, that's when things really started to turn, that we started to notice that, business is really not doing well. Things are really starting to kind of go belly up here. But we really didn't see that in 98. We really, at least most of it. You could say after Starrcade 98, when Nash beat Goldberg, that was when you were like, oh boy. But the Sting Hogan thing, they kind of survived a little bit because they had built up so much good faith. Bischoff then had also started talking about that Thunder had debuted in January of 98, which that was under their cost. They were not getting paid rights fees from TBS, which they should have been. That's how business is done now. This is still in a factor of where rights fees, WWE got rights fees, but WCW didn't because they were technically owned by the company that was allowing them to be broadcast.
Yeah, they were owned by Ted Turner, so that played a role in not getting those additional fees, which you're right, they should have been. 100%.
They should have been, especially the fact that when they went to Thunder, because that just literally came out of his budget. And again, that was wearing people thin because now your roster, because that was the big attraction for Hall and Nash when they went over, because they went over, they were going to get paid a lot more money for a lot less time. WWE, they were working 300 dates a year. WCW, they would be going over and they would be making like 750, or they were making over $1 million after a little while. But they were also working half the dates that they were with WWE. When Bret Hart jumped over at the end of 97, he signed a 3-year deal for about just under $9 million at 125 dates a year. But now with Thunder, I was going to add to the dates. So now people's contracts are going to have to get kind of reshuffled because, or you're not going to be able to use this guy on certain days, because that's also what started the Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff controversy with him going to see his son Reed in a tournament instead of appearing on Thunder. That's what started the litigation that those two had for about 6 months in 98. We also noticed a drop off pretty quickly with when Thunder started. I think that was the time. That was when you could definitely see a bit of a turn of they're not cranking everything out like they used to. Like they're not hitting on all cylinders. Because again, everything kind of got watered down. Because WWE, they just had Monday Night Raw at this point. They didn't get SmackDown until late 99. So they just had their little 2 hours on Monday night and their syndicated stuff on the weekends. But it wasn't to the extent that it later, they got heat later on in 98, but that was still only a 1 hour show. It was on MTV. Well, no, it was on USA. Then it went to MTV.
Yeah.
But it was still kind of, and it almost was used as a pre-show for pay-per-views.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't that a bad thing. It was kind of just like, it's a filler show.
But they used heat too to also put in storylines.
They did.
Right? And that was the problem when Thunder first launched, is they had really no creative direction for a few weeks to a few months even. And you're right, like then they have to look at contract situations, etc., because they were signed by dates and by appearances and not just a flat contract of, you're an employee. So adding to that, like you mentioned the Ric Flair situation, adding to the fact that they have no real creative direction, it was cool to have wrestling on for another day, but it was almost unwatchable for the first few months.
Well, some could argue that Thunder
Still
Was never watchable. I'm trying to be generous, but I guess
It's still it's all unwatchable. What are you guys talking about? You can cut that out.
I need to remind you we're on a wrestling podcast, okay?
You can cut that out.
We're not going to cut that out.
No,
I'm just saying I need to remind you we're on a wrestling podcast. And the fact, too, that you're married to a wrestling fan.
I
and
know,
you're like,
but that's not the reason why I married you at all. Like,
But
you're
you're-
lucky you have so many other redeeming qualities, because if that was your only quality, I would not have given you the time of day.
Smoke.
Thank you.
Our Walmart order is going to be here in like 5 minutes.
Okay,
just
well,
a
we
heads up.
can... We'll pause it when they get to the door, anyways. Like when they finally finish. People know too. They're like, oh, they're getting their Walmart orders. They're going to be pausing it at a certain point. Yeah. But yeah, Thunder, you can make an argument, was entirely unwatchable. I can't remember a goddamn thing. I remember the Buff Bagwell injury. That happened on Thunder.
yeah.
And that was it. I don't remember much else that happened. Like, to me, it was just...
It was few and far between. I think of like some DDP segments that might have been okay, but other than that, yeah, it was pretty unwatchable. I'm not going to disagree.
Yeah,
There may have
I don't
been-
know what went on at all. I don't even know what you guys are talking about now. I'm so glad I'm here.
No, well, you heard about Thunder. You heard about when they got that second show, right?
They mentioned it, but it wasn't really the focus of the. So I. It
was part of it.
That went in and out.
It
of my
actually
head.
was part of it, yeah.
It was part of
I
it.
guess so. It was. I might have been preoccupied. I don't know. I remember them mentioning it.
But
All right.
also, 98 was also the beginning of the rise of our next kind of character that we're going to talk about. Bill fucking Goldberg.
That's a bad word.
But that's his name, though. Like, that's, if you
That's
talk
a
to Bret Hart,
bad
that
word.
is it the F word or is it Goldberg?
I mean, technically both, but Goldberg.
Yes, I'd go with. Steph went into this too, and she was just like, you know, I kind of like Goldberg.
Hold on a second. So
Yes.
we need to preface that. Steph,
Yes.
did you already have a preconceived bias against Bill Goldberg? Because if you had a bias, then, you know, you probably don't like him more, right?
I mean, I didn't have a bias at all
Okay.
about. I didn't really have much of a thought about him.
Okay, that's fair.
So
Because
this,
I would have. I would have and
I mean-
did.
yeah, no, I mean, I can understand like why you guys don't like him. He was kind of a dick, but like, I don't know why he invokes so much hatred in you guys. I don't feel that. I don't feel that towards him.
I can give you that. So part of it is he injured Bret Hart, effectively
retired.
ending.
I saw that, and
Yeah.
that upset me because I love Brett, and I feel like that poor man was just
That
been
poor man.
devoured. That poor man. I want to hug Brett so bad and just say, I am so sorry for everything they did to you. I'm just so sorry.
The other reason I don't like him actually comes from this documentary, because that's a big reason why. I also think he takes opportunities away from younger or current talent, depending on what years we talk about. But the other reason I don't like the guy is because he flat out said in this documentary that during a match with Scott Hall was like, "What are you doing?" And his response was, "I have no idea." I didn't like that. He shouldn't have admitted that.
That wasn't my least favorite comment.
But it was so-
I'm not
So-
saying it's my least favorite. I'm just saying it's another reason why I don't like him.
Well, that wasn't my least favorite from him. My least favorite from him was, if I hurt somebody but the intent's not there, it's not my fault. It's like, you dumb asshole!
Yeah, that's true too. No accountability.
Yeah, that
whatsoever.
one. Yeah, no, that one annoyed me because it's like, okay, so What do you mean? Because you know damn well doing the move the way you're gonna do it is gonna hurt somebody. You know that. So, but you're doing it anyway. So yeah, the intent is there because you're aware that this is gonna hurt someone. So what the fuck do you mean? If the intent's not there, it's not my fault. Then whose fault is it?
Exactly.
You're the one who made the decision to do it.
Watch the kick.
What? Boom.
What? Boom. Fuck.
Right in the face. I mean, yeah, it was a dick. He was a dick move. You know, I don't. But like I said, I know you guys have like a hatred for him. I hate the referee more than I hate Goldberg.
I don't hate Goldberg. I was a fan of Goldberg in 97 and 98. I'll be the first one to admit it. I have figures of Goldberg. I have an autographed plaque from Bill Goldberg. Like, I like Goldberg, the character from 97 and 98. But that's where it fucking stops. Because he retired one of my favorites ever. Because he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. And then he goes to WWE. He's exposed that he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, they literally expose him to the masses and saying, "Oh, he knows 3 moves, if that." And then they bring him back a decade and a half later, and he comes back, and it's kind of a good story for the first few months. Not gonna lie.
I kind of mean to interrupt, but I don't mean to interrupt. I think I did have a little bit of a bias about Goldberg because I just have a vague memory of us in the other apartment. And I think Goldberg was on the TV and you were like, "Oh yeah, I really like this guy," or so, like you've mentioned you liked him. And then I was like, "Oh, he's cool," because like I like the wrestlers that are more just like, they're not like a character, they just play themselves.
It was probably late 2016, early 2017.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was forever ago.
Yeah, it was.
So that could have been why I have what. I was like, I don't understand why you guys hate him so much, because
it was a decent story with the Brock thing. I mean, they had him beat Brock in like 30 seconds, which I kind of disagreed with at the time, but I was just like, well. And then they did the rematch at WrestleMania, which was awesome. It was like 4 minutes long, but it was 4 minutes of just like train wreck of just 2 guys just literally just beating the shit out of each other. But that was it. That was when I was just like, okay, don't need to see you. You got your stuff done. Great. You know, like you got your Legends contract, go off into the sunset and have a good run, right? No. He stuck around for like 5 more years and everything that he was in sucked.
I mean,
He almost
what the
paralyzed
fuck is that? Like, what is that?
Not only did he not only did he end Bret Hart's career, he almost paralyzed The Undertaker. This close to paralyzing The Undertaker. And I don't want to show you that match, honey, because I don't want to do that to people, because it's one of the worst I've ever seen. But it's just Goldberg and The Undertaker. They're both in their 50s. And literally just drops him on his head at one point.
Oh, wait, so he did that after he did everything to Bret?
Yep.
Yeah, this was.
So he came back and then continued to
This was about
fuck around and find out?
Yep.
This was about 20 years after the Bret Hart match. So about 20 years later, this is also another reason why I'm glad Vince is gone. Because of shit like this.
Yep.
But they were in Saudi Arabia, and they decided to do Goldberg and The Undertaker, and both guys are in their 50s. How is this going to play out? How's this going to go? So that's the reason why the case for me not liking Goldberg is there. I don't completely hate him. I don't completely detest him, because there are some moments with him, especially when he beat Hogan at the Georgia Dome. One of the greatest moments in televised wrestling history. It can't even be debated. I was going nuts when he did it. They were going to, it was ridiculous.
He's just kind of dumb and reckless.
That's the problem.
Like, that's what he is. He's dumb and
That
reckless.
sums it up. Dumb and reckless. And that, I think, has kind of added to my angst over the years. But the Bret Hart thing is big. If he paralyzed The Undertaker, I don't know if I could ever forgive him or even say his name without, like, cursing him. Like, I probably would have hired, like, a voodoo doctor or something like that to just put a hex on him or something, because Jesus Christ.
Because Undertaker's one of your number ones.
Yes.
Number one, Undertaker number
Not
one.
just me. Not just me in this platform. Not just
I know.
me.
I think it's adorable for the nostalgia reasons. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's cute. I might not be into wrestling, but I understand your passion for it. Especially too, watching this, I see like how like all the exciting stuff that like happened to these companies were like during the time frame of like when it was the marketing was directed towards your age group at the time. You know, so I can see like how like it just sucked you guys in at, you know, your preteens and whatever. And there is a culture behind it that's still going strong and that you guys can still be a part of. And I think that's really cool. I just don't particularly like the just wrestling. Well, but I can respect and understand everything else, like, you know.
I'll tell you what it was, because when we at least when I got in, I was 7 years old. So it was still the Hulkamania era where Hogan's still in the red and yellow. And so I was still into that cartoon over the top, and I accepted that, and I was fine with it. As I got older, and when the NWO started happening, I was 13. So when you hit that age, your mind and
but that's what I mean. It was
change.
Such a perfect kind of whatever, because once you turn 13, yeah, you do kind of want to start being more of like a badass. And, you know, I'm not a little kid anymore, man. I'm a badass. And then NWO comes out and you're like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
Like when Hogan turned, I loved every second of it. Like I hung on every goddamn word he was saying in that promo, just because it was everything that I had felt almost at that point, because it was just like, I was tired of it. Like wrestling at that point, it was just like, we had just gotten over 4 months before the Dungeon of Doom angle, like the Doomsday Cage match at Uncensored, which was terrible. But Hogan was still trying to do what he was doing in 1984. 96, he sees what Hall and Nash do and come in, gets on that train, and we're off in races. We're off to the races. Like, there's a reason that moment happened. And then the NWO shirts, the NWO merchandise, are still top 10 sellers to this day. It's been 30 years almost. Same thing with Austin, because the Austin 316 promo and the NWO promo and the inception with Hogan Turn happened within about 3 weeks of each other. So it was like, just turned 13, the ultimate badass rebel makes his introductory kind of promo into the character that he's now going to become. And then within 3 weeks, the man that you followed through everything, Andre the Giant, the war against Roddy Piper, the wars against the Ultimate Warrior, the wars against Sergeant Slaughter, ending the Iraq War in 1991. All of that, all of that led to 96 and the turn. And at 13 years old, when you're starting to want there to be an edge in your life, because you want to be cool, you want to be accepted, man. And the NWO was the one thing that I looked at, because I remember that summer it was before that summer, it was between 7th and 8th grade. You go home for the summer, no one was talking about wrestling. You come back August, September, everybody's talking about wrestling. And 99% of it is the NWO. Because the guy that everybody followed as a kid had made the sudden shift. And then, like, because they were cool. Like, they were...
Well, because it gave the automatic general message of fuck the man. That's what NWO kind of represented.
Pretty much, yeah.
And an angsty teenager, that's what they were all about. You know what I mean? So if they were into wrestling as they were younger, and now all of a sudden they have this fuck the man, yeah, we're badasses, come back into the scene at the age when you want to kind of have that persona, it's yeah. So I can see why it's so ingrained in you guys, because obviously, you know, I didn't watch it when I was a kid, so I didn't get the feels that you guys got watching it as kids. You know, like you think back to the nostalgia of the emotions that you felt when you were watching it as a kid, and just how epic it was at that time, and blah 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 blah. And I'm just watching it through like an adult's eyes, not knowing nothing. So I'm sorry to the audience if I don't have this deep appreciation for wrestling.
Do you think there would be any incidents that you saw from kind of like the NWO's kind of like beginning? You know, because I remember we were talking about what happened at MGM with Rey Mysterio getting lawn darted into the side of the trailer. But was there any instance that you could have probably seen yourself getting involved in that and liking that, or being a fan of that?
Not at
like,
all.
And not any instance?
No, it was all just it's ridiculousness to me.
I mean, it is ridiculous. I'll be the first one to admit it.
Just so ridiculous. I don't think. Yeah, no, sorry.
You know what
I
it is
you.
for me? What you said, I think is kind of important in the sense of like looking at it from the perspective of being younger, especially those teenage years. That's when you get a lot of that like teenage angst and teenage rebellion, to where those, you know, the Attitude Era, or whatever you want to call it, WCW's era, I think is super important, because they're forming the NWO to rebel against management of WCW. You have a character in WWF, WWE, whatever you want to call it, at that time anyways, that Stone Cold and The Rock and Mankind, especially those top three, that are kind of like rebellious characters. And obviously there are others, but those are like the top three that come to mind when you think of those type of characters in that era. And I think that's super important as to maybe why it was successful. Is because you did have a lot of, you know, teenagers, young adults watching at that time, and especially the Steve Austin character, where he's rebelling against his boss, of all people, that I think it becomes super important and understandable to why it was so successful. Because we haven't really had much of that since.
No.
You know, we talked on the shoot, the last show, you and I, about how you had a guy like Cena that is like this cookie cutter face for the next like 10 plus years, basically. And it's just, it didn't really work for a lot of people. You mentioned on the show that it drove some people away. And then now you have Roman Reigns, who comes in kind of after that, after Brock, after others, that is now a little bit different kind of heel, but still very similar and doesn't respect authority. Has his own authority, and that's his only authority that he has, really, and it works. And he has a mouthpiece like Paul Heyman to facilitate that. And now we're kind of getting away with that a little bit with, you know, maybe what happens going into this year with Cody and The Rock and Roman and stuff, and no one knows what that's going to look like. But I just think overall it's kind of telling that what succeeds are those rebellious characters. And that's
Well,
exactly
not
what
for
happened
nothing.
then. Go ahead.
Any story, any good story has a villain.
True.
And the villain, at some point, wins in the story overall. You know what I mean? And this
Yeah,
wrestling
absolutely.
is just is a never-ending story. That's just what wrestling is. So you're gonna have to still incorporate new villains. You know what I mean? In order
Yeah.
for the baby faces to be able to triumph over evil, and you know what I mean, like that whole concept.
The money is in the
Yep.
chase.
Yes.
The money is in the chase of the good guy chasing the bad guy.
Yeah, like if it's all good guys, like how it's not really, it's boring.
Yeah, it is. And I think that was part of the problem why when Cena came in, because Cena never took a risk. He never took a risk. Hogan turning was a massive fucking risk. That could have went bad, but it didn't. I think he kind of figured it out. He was just like, this thing's catching fire. If I'm with those two guys, this works because these fans have already seen me as a Titan Sports WWE property anyways. So if I go with these guys, it makes sense because we're all WWE properties. They don't want us here. And Cena never did that. Cena never went against the grain. It was just like, well, I'm going to sell shirts regardless. Granted, he did. But nobody cared. More people stopped watching wrestling that I know during John Cena's run than any other time in history. A lot of them now have come back because of Roman Reigns and the Cody Rhodes feud. But a lot of those people, too, that had stayed with wrestling for so long, they all started because of the Monday Night Wars. And they stuck around and they kept going for a while. There were a lot of us that just dug in and just stayed. And some of us dipped out. Mac at one point had dipped out for quite a number of years.
Guilty.
And then finally was just like, okay, things are finally starting to take place. Where I felt like at some point I was on Revis Island all by myself. Just sitting like,
You were like those Red Sox fans in like the early to mid '90s that like had Stockholm syndrome, where you're still a fan even though it's just an awful product at that point.
Well, hey, that was me. That's still me. That was me too as a kid.
So I mean, they definitely need villains in order for the story to stay interesting.
They had one. It was Vince McMahon backstage. I'm gonna book it the way I want to.
He done fucked up.
Well, especially when it was like the corporate ministry, the higher power. It was me, Austin. It was me all along.
Ah, son of a bitch! Like Russo was involved in that too. I think Russo was the head writer during that.
Shocking.
Yeah.
I don't like that man either.
Oh, you don't?
So hold on. We haven't really talked about him.
After watching this, I do not like that man.
Hold on. We haven't really talked about him. So I added a picture during the brief pause that we had. And I had this originally when we talked about this on the shoot/PWW. According to Vice TV, they interviewed Vince Russo for 4 hours for this miniseries. And Vince Russo said 353 times during the course of his 4-hour session. I believe it was dude, bro. I think it was bro.
No, it was bro. 353 times.
I don't know why.
He just said it like 5 times in one sentence.
Yep, it was bro. Sorry. It was weird cropping, but yeah. Said bro 353 times in the course of 4 hours. So doing the math, that is a bro every less than a minute.
Oh, God.
But he was a writer, right?
Yes.
He was a writer?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
He was never the head writer of WWE. I don't care what he says.
But still, he's a writer, and
he was
his
still a
vocabulary
writer, yeah.
is just
he was a writer,
so
but he was not the head writer of WWE. There's only one head writer. Well, up until a couple of years ago. But there was only one
Freddie Prinze Jr.?
Yeah. Nothing but a Scooby-Doo douchebag. But but he was never the head writer, and that's one thing I always get annoyed with Russo. I was the head writer of WWE. It's like, no, you weren't. No. You always had someone to answer to in WWE.
You know what I love? You know what I loved when he started talking, and they started talking about bringing Eric back on to work with Russo, and they went to Russo and was just like, "Oh, we'll have you
part of a committee.
Be part of a committee, start writing." And he's like, I'm not going to be part of a committee, and blah 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 blah. And then I think when Bischoff wound up leaving again or something,
yes.
Then he's like, then I started writing with the committee, and did it. It's like, what?
He is.
What are you talking about, bro?
He is so full of shit. Like, it's just, he is one of those guys in this industry that is just completely full of shit. When he was just like, if there was no Eric Bischoff, him and Hulk Hogan could work together. It's like, no, bro, no. There was no working there. Neither one of you were to be able to work together because you have this mindset of, let's get the mid-carders. Oh, I'm making a television show, bro, where, sorry, Hogan wants to be on the upper card still. He wants to be in the main event because the name of the marquee, he's still there. Like, he's the biggest name they got.
He made it way too much like a trashy TV show than showing off the actual sport of wrestling.
That's true. He did.
Well,
so
not only that,
he is another top contributor to the murder.
You're right.
In my opinion.
You're right. The only other thing I would add to that is he also featured himself way too heavily.
Oh, remember the Pope Mobile?
Yeah, I remember. I try to forget a lot of that, but I do remember that.
Well, this is one of the things I said too. Just watching through the whole thing, in the end, I really feel like Eric Bischoff just really wanted to do what was best for the company and make the company as big as he possibly can. Russo just wanted to be famous. He didn't give a fuck. He wanted to be famous.
I
agree. Yeah. I think it's hard to disagree with that. I think he also wanted to add, really what it comes down to for me is shock value. He wanted to get people talking. He figured the best way to do that would be add a shock value system almost to WCW.
Well, I think he was trying to get the shock value that was well received when NWO happened.
Yeah.
But he went above and beyond where it just became
yep.
Way too much.
Well, a lot of, because part of his thing with Attitude was when he was with WWE was the rise of certain female talents like Sable, who got propelled into the mainstream audience because of she did Playboy. But a big reason because of that was because they focused so much of the television on Sable. And when he went to WCW, you started seeing him do the same thing with other women. Like
the Nitro
Medusa,
Girls.
the Nitro Girls that were infighting. This dance team was now having to do with storylines of members within fighting each other. There is other instances of, I think they showed Kimona Wanalea. I can't remember her name in WCW.
I forget.
But I know her from Kimona Wanalea from ECW. And people ever watch that High Incident commercial from ECW, they'll understand what I'm talking about. Make sure you get High Incident here on VHS, where you'll see, it's but Kimona's in a cheerleader's outfit. She's doing just doing strip teases. It's like, what am I watching here? This is supposed to be, because WCW was always known as the workhorse company. They were known where you were actually going to get the best in-ring product in pro wrestling, even better than WWE. And there were a lot of instances where that was still happening in 98, 99, when things were starting to fall apart. They still had very solid mid-card. And their main event scene, they had guys that could put on good matches. A lot of them just chose not to. But
Boo ran.
they were a company that was built around, work rate. It wasn't a company built around, the glitz and the glamour and the trash TV, which what it became. So I felt like Russo coming into this company that had already gone through such a dramatic transformation when Hulk Hogan came in. And now they're having to go through another kind of rebranding a couple of years later. I feel like it almost alienated the fan base that they had already had from Jim Crockett Promotions. That's why a lot of those guys probably started to die off and not watch, because it wasn't the same product that they were used to back in 1990, 88, 87, even 92 or 93. It was now more of a Hollywood television property, which they really don't talk about. They really don't talk about where I think that main audience of WCW kind of felt alienated with all these changes being made, because it no longer was the Southern Wrestling Company. It was now, we're trying to compete with Vince.
Yeah.
And this was also the same audience that heavily rejected the WWF when Vince McMahon bought Georgia Championship Wrestling back in 1984. And he was on WTBS for a while, but the ratings never met up. He sold the property over to Crockett, and he was able to use that, and that's what turned Jim Crockett Promotions into World Championship Wrestling in '88 when the sale went through. So they never really discussed. I feel like that kind of was maybe a part of the dissolution of their fan base, because all those hardcore fans did not see or recognize what made them a fan in the first place.
Yeah, they started to less and less recognize that original product, and especially as Vince is kind of consolidating these smaller promotions before WCW, and then eventually WCW, it takes on a different look every time. And you're right, WCW, they really did not address it in this docuseries, miniseries at all, to where it looks less and less and less like that original product. And I think it's important to talk about, because again, like, you go from all these transformations, that Southern and less, world championship, and maybe more consolidated regional kind of territory, to having guys like, and guys featured more often, guys like Hulk Hogan, guys like Hall and Nash, Sting to a lesser extent, who had kind of been there already. Same with Flair, who was in and out, and all these other guys, especially that they brought in from the years and years, like the Bretts, like the Lugers, who'd been in WWE previously. And we talked about this the last time we talked about it, Dan, where we're talking about the mid-card, especially with guys like the Radicals, who just jump ship. And there goes your WCW mid-card. There goes all those quality matches. When, even prior to that, when Jericho came over, he's presented as a much bigger talent than he was in WCW. Not to say he wasn't big in WCW, but he was more known for his, cruiserweight work than he was for being a main event talent. Same with the Radicals. Same with a lot of other guys that ended up leaving before the inevitable death of WCW. So, it's a lot. And I think we talked about this too the last time we had spoken about it on the shoot and Pro Wrestling World Talks, where we basically said that any of these players on the screen right now were not the sole reason why WCW died. It's all of them and a lot more reasons, like the politics in the main office, like the politics of kind of squashing their budget, Siegel and others, and even Ted. Ted didn't really care. By the end, Ted was like, get rid of it.
Well, Ted, they kind of had edged him out, like
That's true.
especially with the merger. They talked about with
Yep.
yeah, especially when AOL that merger happened, which
AOL did not want it at all.
AOL did not want it, and AOL didn't even want Ted's opinion. Like they had, as soon as that merger went through, it was like Ted was so marginalized at this point. He had no control whether he wanted to keep it or not. And also television had changed by that point because they were going through at least what TNT and TBS were. Held that to such a high regard as the flagships of their network, that the crime jewels, and that was basically because TNT had the NBA, they still had the NBA up until next year, and TBS still had Major League Baseball, they had the Braves, and coming into 2000, 2001, all those things were still highly considered like gold standard, like top tier. Wrestling has always been considered low rent. It's always not been considered advertiser friendly, except now. WWE, they always talk about how much money they make at these PLEs with their sponsorships. I mean, WrestleMania, it was like a commercial every match of a new product. It was like they would project on the side rails and things of that nature, a new product. This match is brought to you by Man Wipes. This match is brought to you by Truly, or Bud Light. It's become more advertiser friendly now because they understand marketing better. I think.
And they don't have villains.
Well, no, they have villains. Roman was considered a villain.
I think that has to do with the PG era, though, to be truthful. Where they kind of shifted away from the blood, the hardcore, and all that other stuff. Once they kind of made that shift.
Like, they just made it a lot more family friendly.
Well, I mean, I can't say I blame them. I mean, if you have... Because these kids, they look up to these wrestlers as... They're like everyday people. They're not like... it's not normal, like, this person is playing Spider-Man. This person plays Superman, or Robert Downey Jr. was Iron Man. Yeah, it's... These people are kind of like... They're on TV, but at the same time, then you can see them going to grab coffee at Starbucks or like at the airport. Like it's almost like that they're characters, yeah, but you can also, they're not. It's kind of like amped up real life than they are in real life. And I feel like that's the unique relationship with wrestlers as far as being celebrities. It's a very fine line. Now here's an interesting part that I had to bring up to Stephanie and kind of fill her in on, because we talked about the Radicals and their change when they switched over from WCW over to WWF. And I had to mention to her that Chris Benoit was a part of it and that Kevin Sullivan was the booker. That was the main reason why they left. Kevin Sullivan had made him the WCW champion, and then within 15 days, he was now on WWE television. So he was technically the lineal champion. And I had mentioned to her that Chris Benoit and Kevin Sullivan had heat. And I explained why. And that was mostly because of the relationship that had ended, the marriage that had ended between Kevin Sullivan and Nancy Sullivan. And Nancy Sullivan would later on become Nancy Benoit. And we all know how that story tragically ended. So I kind of had to fill her in there on the gap on that, on why that there may have been some previous heat between Chris and Kevin, which had led to his departure in early 2000. Yeah. Because a lot of the Benoits... Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I can kind of see why, though, they didn't want to mention that, so...
No. It's not like one of those... they also had already done a Dark Side of the Ring on the Benoit situation, where Kelvin Sullivan had been accused of being abusive to Nancy. So I was rather surprised that even Kevin Sullivan agreed to do this documentary, because it was a combined effort with $7 production and the same people that were doing the Dark Side of the Ring. So I felt like a little bit that it may have been kind of problematic, or something that you really don't want to talk about. Should go in too much, at least. And it is a very sensitive topic, considering the fact of that really no one wants to talk about it. Not even on the Dark Side of the Ring. It's just like, it's just one of those topics. It's like, nah, move on, please. But Russo came off like a complete ass. We had the thing that happened at Bash.
Doesn't he, though?
He always comes off as an ass, but he really came off as an ass on this episode, on these episodes, especially too when he says when he was just like, all this just brings up why I hate professional wrestling, bro. Meanwhile, he's still doing a podcast where he's talking about professional wrestling, bro. And I told Steph about and I think Mac can remember this. I don't know if he can or not, but
20 years ago, bro.
20 years ago, bro. It may have been the night that he won the title. In a promo that he had said he said, "We are in the Long Island, New York, the greatest city in the world." And I said that to Stephanie, and Steph just like, oh God.
I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm glad that I'm not the only. I'm glad it wasn't some fever dream. I just remember it.
No, I remember it.
Why are you laughing, honey?
This is so dumb.
I think it's funny because he's from Long Island too. Is the thing?
Like, it's just so dumb. Exactly. That makes it even worse. He's so stupid.
He really is just an idiot. Just a complete ass. Like it.
Shut up, bitches.
I wish we had one for the wrong button. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. I'm so sorry. Beach.
I thought about it. I did that. Like it's. I get so many. I get so many that I think of. And I start adding, and my board is like half sound bites at this point. So
we need to get that clip from American Dad I sent you last week.
Jesus.
Anytime now. Anytime I have a thought,
dude,
this person is
I could fill the board with American Dad sound bites because Stan Smith and Roger just have so many quotables in that show.
I'm trying to figure out if Roger is the greatest creation in that whole Seth MacFarlane universe. Because the first couple of years,
he's up there,
first couple of years, I found him severely annoying.
Oh,
like,
it gets so
annoying.
much better after the first season.
But then after a while, it was just like, I love this character.
Because the first season was political, racial, and religious jokes nonstop. Yes. And then after the first season, especially after the second, is when it finally hit a stride of, we're going to have less of those, still incorporate them, but we're going to make jokes about everything again.
And then it's just, he's got 900 different... Like, when they went to TBS, too, they just stopped really giving a shit. It was just like, all right, we're just going to throw it up against the wall.
Yep.
All right, Roger's going to be this. Like, and
they finally incorporated every costume Roger had into the opening, too. Just, it made it funnier.
I'm wondering if, at some point, Family Guy is going to make the switch over to TBS. And, because they're already at a point now where if you see the last couple of years, they're just like, fuck it.
Yeah.
They still have that, the last couple of years, their edge is starting to come back. where they're just, because a couple of years there, they were just like, eh. But now it's like, from what I've seen the last couple of seasons I saw, they're really starting to get like that old edge that they had the first couple of years that they were on. Speaking of edge and losing it, let's talk about Adam Copeland. No, never mind.
Who ran?
It always throws me off when I'm just listening to Dan speak, and then all of a sudden I hear a little munchkin lady. I forget she's a soundbite, and I'm like, what?
Who ran?
Oh.
She knows she is too. I showed her.
Well, she should. At this point, she's probably gotten more play than most celebrities sometimes on YouTube.
I think she has, actually.
Yeah.
She's one of the funniest people I know. Love her.
The best one was when one of the last time you guys were over here, and she was just like, "We have to go to." She wanted to go to Cracker Barrel, the restaurant, and
instead of just
like,
bringing, and she's like, I
like the
you
vibe
know,
better.
I just want a different vibe.
Oh, she's like,
and I'm like, I'm
10.
sorry, like.
But she's like 10, going on 11, going on like
exactly
16
like,
probably.
I'm like, what's wrong with the vibe here? She's like, no, I just want to go to the vibe. And then it wound up being one of like the worst experiences because we like waited forever, and I'm sitting next to her going, aren't you so glad? Don't you just love
Oh,
this
she was
vibe?
getting mad at you for that too.
Don't you just love this vibe? I'm so glad we did this. You had such a great idea.
This is a great idea.
That's a bad word.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out, like, we could talk about, of course, the finger poke of doom also being another like reason why this company was in the shitter that it was. At least.
Oh, you don't want to talk about the night that Hogan made pretty much his last appearance? You don't want to talk about that one?
We could talk about that as well, where pretty much he got called a bald piece of shit by Vince Russo, which at that point puts you at slander. Not the balding part, but he did call him a piece of shit.
I mean, is it slander really? Is it just the truth, maybe?
It is, though. It's slander.
I know.
On this program, it's slander. You do not talk about Hulk Hogan that way. Not on this program.
I don't know if everybody out there or you guys have watched anything called The Tourette's Guy. So just random guy who just spouts out the mouth. One of the things that he says in one of his videos is, "Don't talk shit about Total!"
Yes.
And I feel like I'm going to have to get that now after saying it, because it's the same. Don't talk shit about Hogan!
Yes, there's certain people on this program that's like, it's very hard for me. Because I have, every day that I'm in my humble abode, I look at that.
Oh, you know what?
I look at that.
I didn't put two and two together.
What?
Because it's still, I'm so excited that you got to meet him, but like,
Yes.
then I'm like watching these things. I'm like, oh, he's such a dick.
I can understand the sentiment, but I also, like, people could be like, well, Sting 97, then I'll be like, but he put Goldberg over.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though, like, and I think it's an important kind of mention, too. It's like, I hate Goldberg. like again, guilty. But I respect what he was able to do for the business. I'm not the biggest Hogan fan, but same thing. I respect what he did for the business, especially if you look at the longevity of his career and how long he was able to stay relevant, whether it be in WWE as, you know, the Real American hero, the ender of the Gulf War, or in WCW as Hollywood Hogan. And like, if you look at the length of his career, it's huge. You know, then he comes back to WWE. He has the feud with The Rock. He has a feud with Shawn Michaels, with others, with Vince again, even, for Christ's sake. And I think, you know, like, I could respect it from that opinion. I still don't like the guy, but I can respect it.
You know what? It's not that I don't like Hogan. I am just very disappointed in him.
Okay, Mom.
I'm just saying, I'm very disappointed in his behavior. That's all I got to say about that.
Well, it's hard for me to really, being a Hulkamaniac and an NWO, it's hard for me to kind of sit here and to besmirch the man. At least, I mean, the man as a character, I'm not talking about the person. The person is a different story, nonetheless. Which backstage you can make the argument is the person. Hulk Hogan, no problem with it all. Terry Bollea, there are some things that way, I don't even want to discuss. But it's hard to argue that his decision making and his creative control did not cause problems in WCW, because there were some decisions that he made that definitely sped the decline up.
Well, who's to say that's true, though? Who's to say that it didn't cause problems and nobody just talked about it? You know, like maybe not at the head or the executive table, but I'm sure some of the talent was fucking pissed.
It's everybody else too on that main event scene, because it wasn't just Hogan.
No, it wasn't.
You had Piper there. You had Savage. Even though Savage made Diamond Dallas Page,
yeah, he did.
Randy Savage made DDP what DDP became. So from that end, there are guys that definitely made sacrifices for the good of the company to make talent immediately, which is something that that Macho Man did with DDP. DDP was pretty much a mid-carder at this point, and
I'm sorry, Kimberly Page also made him too.
Well,
Who ran?
as you'll get this reference. You have at this point now Randy Savage being able to raise somebody up and take his finish and then take the pin. Okay. You have with Macho Man this guy that's willing to put people over, that's willing to do the right thing and make somebody else look good and bring somebody up. And that's what they did with Dallas. They did it with Goldberg. Hogan raised him up to a tremendous position and made it believable that this guy who literally started here 9 months ago is now defeating the greatest world champion in the history of the industry. And again, they sold it. They made it believable. Hogan had him kick out of 3 leg drops, for Christ's sake, and still made him a world beater. And sometimes you pick and choose sometimes who you feel like deserves the rub. And did Hogan probably should Hogan have done more? I felt like, yes. Did he do, I felt like, the bare minimum? Yeah. I'll give him that he did the bare minimum. But he should have done a lot more. Because by 99, 2000, it was already starting to wane. It was already starting at that point of just, all right, come on, let's see something else. Yeah, we loved Hollywood, but at the same time, we need something. You need to start giving back a little bit, because when you're in a heel faction like that for so long, you are eating everything that's coming your way and you're destroying it. And you need to be able to build up more baby faces. They did that with DDP. They built one up, but they squandered Sting. They killed Luger off too at one point. So really the only one that was on their level or was going to be able to get to that level was Goldberg. He was the last one.
Fans came for a couple minutes. Continue.
Okay. She walked away from it. But you have at this point with now with Hogan picking and choosing who he wants to lose to in the right environment. Yeah, that's part of it, but I didn't see really Hall and Nash going out there either and making younger talent look good. I mean, I could give Nash some credit because he did it with Mysterio that one time. That was after Mysterio had lost his mask to him. And then the next night, it's just like, he beat me.
Yeah, but Hall did it in WWF. Hall put over 1, 2, 3 Kid.
He did. And I remember he did put over Jericho one night on Nitro.
Yep. That was another one. Yep.
Of course, he kicked the crap out of Jericho after that, but that did help Jericho in his early career.
Oh, absolutely.
These guys, I mean, sometimes they just know too. They have instincts, because all of us can say on paper, right? We can all say, well, this guy should have beat him. This guy was ready. This guy was up there. And it's like, that's easy for us to say because we're here. Like we're on the couch or we're watching it on TV, but we're not there. We're not in the audience because not a famous story, but more or less something that I observed a couple of years ago. They had just brought Braun Strowman back to TV. It was after he was released, and they brought him back in 2022. And I was at SmackDown. I was there live, and I just remember the audience reacting to Braun, and I just thought to myself, this is why they brought him back. You have to sometimes be there live to understand the magnitude of a talent. Like, as much as I can hate the John Cena era, he still got a reaction. 90% of the time it was bad, but he still got a reaction. Hogan, it was the same thing. They never stopped cheering or booing. They always, it wasn't like he came out and it was just like you heard a pin drop. Is there a talent now that come out on either show, either WWE, AEW, or TNA, that get no response? No one cares. And they really didn't have that at that time, though, because everybody was getting a reaction. Because that was also the first time where video games were starting to come into play about your favorite wrestler. Because, again, I talked about it with NWO Revenge. Everybody wanted to use Billy Kidman back then because he could do a shooting star press. And it was a cool move. And nobody wanted to use Hogan because it was just like, he just has a fucking leg drop? Really? Really? Nash, they liked because he had a cool move. You like Goldberg because he had cool moves. We were entering a different, you can look at it from the late 90s and that's that point of view because the technology wasn't there for us when we were kids on the NES and the SNES. When we're playing these video games and everybody's got the same move sets. Yeah, if you're playing Royal Rumble, you're playing Raw on the SNES or Sega Genesis for that matter, you can hit the finishing moves. But everything else, it was all the same. They did this, they did that, same thing. Where you were playing World Tour, you're playing Revenge, you're playing WrestleMania 2000 or No Mercy, everybody's got their own assigned move sets. They got their own assigned taunts. They got their own finishers. And that's when people started to, you saw kids back in the day play those video games that had no idea with pro wrestling exactly what it was. But they had their favorite characters just on their move sets. I know people that did this. They didn't know a damn thing about wrestling, but they loved playing Revenge, World Tour, all those N64 games they had just mentioned, just on the move sets. Just because the guy had a cool move set.
Well, look at it now with the mods you can put on some of these games too. You could create Sting if he's not in the game. You can create Flair or Hacksaw or whoever, really. Just create them. The mods and the suites and just even the internal creative character is just at that level that you could do that. But back then, yeah, absolutely. I would say the big two for the N64 were that one that you mentioned and probably WrestleMania 2000. I'd say those are the biggest two wrestling games of the time period.
you just brought up the mods, and I'll tell you what. So 2K24, I just downloaded a Sting recently that has the voice taunts. So
see,
like you hear the voice taunts, so it's like, but he's not in the game, but he is, especially now because it's not like it was before, where you had to go. Oh God, those days, those terrible days of having to go online. I think this is the only reason I used school printers back in the day, was because I was getting formulas for creator wrestlers and having to go home and work on them.
Yep. I remember doing that too. I remember printing out, whether it be like a GameFAQs walkthrough for certain games, or GameFAQs, how to create this person or that person and what movesets. Yeah, I remember that.
It was also before, like, because when Community Creations came out, it was just like, well, somebody else is doing my work for me. I'm done. Like, I'm not making another. I only make characters for me, and that's pretty much it. Because somebody else is going to do a better job. They're better with the designs of it. I'll go and critique the movesets, though. I'll be like, why the fuck did you give him this? He doesn't do this. He hasn't done this since like 1985. I don't know why you're doing this. Yeah. But, yeah. It's so much to kind of they did give us a lot that we kind of have repeated. Like, and I know we've repeated on this program, but just in general, because you watch every shoot interview out there, it's just like you always see the same suspects of people, always the same incidences that kind of get talking about. Is there any incidences in your mind, Mac, that you remember that you thought kind of accelerated things of being that bad that maybe not many people talk about?
I was waiting for Steph to come back, actually, for one of two reasons, and one is to talk about. Oh, you are, okay. So one is a soundbite that I found. So hold on a real sec.
You are a great disappointment to your mother and I.
That was, you said Hogan was a disappointment.
Yeah.
So I had to find that one. One of the things that we didn't really talk about, though, is another reason for the death of WCW, which kind of goes into what you were talking about, Dan, even though a lot of people do talk about this one, is one of potentially the worst WCW World Heavyweight Champions. Foreign objects! David Arquette.
Oh, God. Oh, I'm glad we brought this up.
I remember him showing that to me before we even watched it. It was like a clip on a YouTube video or something, and I'm like, wait. I was so confused.
Wait, what?
And like, he was trying to explain, and I'm like, but why? Like, that just seems so not. That was my initial reaction.
Well,
and then we were watching it, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's when I think I finally sent you the voice note saying you both have revoked your card to ever make fun of anything me or Kelly watch or enjoy. You revoked it. You need to shut your mouth. If I'm watching my Sister Wives or something, Dan, keep your mouth shut, because the ridiculousness and the drama that was wrestling behind the scenes, on the scenes, whatever I watch does not compare. So I better, and I told Kelly to tell me too. I specifically told her, like, if Mac ever makes fun of you for anything that you're watching, you tell me.
Does that include the musicals that she wanted you to watch for part of your
your
show?
Listen, if she wants, I don't have to watch them. If she wants to watch them, keep your mouth shut. This
is why I have like a million headphones and other shit, so I can tune all of that stuff out.
There you go.
So, the one thing I would say, kind of talking about the David Arquette situation, is again, doesn't help WCW. Definitely is potentially why they lead to the death of WCW. Not a sole reason, mind you, of course. But that was a time period where WCW would try to do anything.
God.
So a couple of things that we don't really mention all the time is RoboCop.
Oh,
That's one of them. Rebranding an existing wrestler as Glacier, who was supposed to be a rip-off of Mortal Kombat's Sub-Zero. And, there's a plethora of other things that they had done, especially in the Vince Russo era. But I would say that one of the worst ones, again, is this whole trying to market the movie Ready to Rumble, because there are a lot of WCW talent in that movie, to a point of doing the exact same match they had in that movie with the triple cages. And of course, in that time, also crowning David Arquette as world champion. Which, to me, and I think Conan even dropped this, where he's like, there's so many other guys, and it's nothing against David Arquette, but what the fuck? I get it. You want to market a movie.
I was confused. I'm like, out of all people, like it's just why? Like,
you
why?
from fucking Scream? Like, what the fuck?
It did not just register the why and how it made sense. It just doesn't.
Why?
The one thing I do though like is that when David Arquette relinquished the belts, I love that he gave Booker T a shout out.
Yeah.
Give to someone who deserves it, like Booker T, because Booker T apparently hasn't won one yet.
Yeah,
at that point.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yep. And I was like, no, yeah, Booker T, yeah. And that's like, I started like really like cheering on Booker like throughout the rest of the episodes.
I think for me, it was before the Arquette thing. It was after Benoit had left and Kevin Nash was the commissioner. And Kevin Nash decided that if Sid wanted to get the title back, he was going to have to face the Harris twins. And there was some stipulation where he had to pin a certain Harris brother. The Harris brothers are twins. They look exactly the same. And so Sid hits the one with the power bomb, pins him. So you leave that night thinking Sid won the title. Next time you watch TV, you find out we're stripping Sid of the title because he pinged the wrong Harris twin. That was the point. I said, there's no fucking hope. That was like in January or February of 2000. So 3 months before, 2 months even before they brought Bischoff and Russo back, and then 3 months before David Arquette. But February of 2000, that's when I was just like, they're in serious trouble. They just did this whole storyline with Sid, and he pinned the wrong Harris twins. Now they stripped him of the title. So now they have a vacant champion again. The title was vacant like 4 times in a period of 2 weeks. It was fucking ridiculous.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Just the vacating of the title in general and how many world champions they had at the end is just obnoxious.
I think they had something like 30 to 40 world title changes in the year 2000 alone.
I don't remember. I remember walking at the list a long time ago, probably before we even talked about these on the show, and it's an obnoxious amount. Like, even if it's not 30 or 40, it was still an obnoxious amount either way.
Just an amount of just like, you gotta be kidding. Like, this was a title that had the lineage going back, because technically they were still using the NWA lineage.
Can I just make one quick point?
Absolutely.
Nobody wins anything in wrestling, okay? Nobody is actually a winner.
Shut up, bitches!
Listen, I know people hate me, or they're gonna hate me. I'm sorry if your listeners drop after this episode, but
no, they won't. They won't.
Realistically, not one wrestler has actually won a belt, because you're not winning it. You're being told who's going to get the belt before. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand. That's part of the concept I don't understand.
Cornbread.
Why people are so butthurt over who gets the belt or not. It's Yell at the writers, like, because they're the ones who wrote it. Okay.
Well, how do you think it feels for the current world champion of WWE, Cody Rhodes, who just won the title from Roman, and people are already criticizing his title reign, and he's been champion for all of 3 months?
Hold on.
Who
I didn't
ran?
register anything you just said. What?
Listen, we have people that are butthurt that a female talent went to WWE instead of like AEW, or instead of staying with New Japan or CMLL or wherever.
Yes,
they're butthurt about that too. Like, there's always going to be a subset of fans that, regardless of what you say, whether it be what you just said or anything else for that matter, someone's going to get butthurt about. It's just that's the tribalism of wrestling fans these days.
It was nice to see the message boards, like those little B-roll footage, little transitions, and they were the message boards of actively that were going on back then. I kind of miss those days a lot because we were all kind of anonymous, and it's not like where now everything is a face to a name type deal. When we're messaging people back and telling them how shitty of an idea that is. God, I remember being up at late nights just on these message boards. You're just fighting with people. You're going to war with these people verbally about like the littlest minute point, and all you're doing is hit refresh, because you're waiting for this person to reply to you. But that was the fun, unanimous, anonymous side of it, where now it's like if you argue with people, they know who you are. They can just look up your Facebook profile and be like, oh, or they can look up your ex profile and be like, oh. And I don't know.
I'm surprised I haven't been swatted yet, for Christ's sake.
I know.
Like, damn.
Especially some of our comments on AEW.
That's exactly why I said that comment. just FYI.
These super fans that probably just think, oh my God, all they do is shit on everything. No. We just try to tell it like it is on this program. And again, I'd rather be right than, sit here and tell you everything is all shiny and rainbows.
Well, I'm not saying my opinion is right. It's just my opinion. Doesn't mean I'm right.
But you're right in what you said about like no one actually wins anything. You're right. Like, and I can't argue that. I mean,
I don't sugarcoat things. Like, it's just sugarcoating things and like trying to make them something that they're not.
This is why our relationship works.
It just fucking annoys me. It's like, just say how it is, do it how it is. Like, let's be fucking real, okay? Let's be real.
Yes. And you're a very real person that has to deal with somebody that likes a very fake thing in wrestling.
Like I said, honey, you are so lucky you have so many other endearing qualities.
That's true.
Do you want me to leave the room and I can come back later?
You have great qualities too,
man.
Like, Mac, I love you too. I set you up with my bestest friend. That's like the next best thing. That means like I love you that much that I would risk you possibly hurting my best friend. I had that much faith in you that you wouldn't, and you would take care of it.
Is it like hot out? Is it me? Like, what the fuck's going on right now?
I just want you to feel the love, Mac. There's nothing but love.
Anyway,
is the dog on your lap? Is that why you're feeling hot?
Pun not intended, given the conversation. Shit,
well,
and no, I don't let her down here, because holy shit.
Right. I do constantly get pictures of the dog prohibiting you from working, and then I do share them with Dan. So, it's adorable. I love it.
It is very cute.
She loves you.
He loves her daddy.
My kids.
He loves her daddy.
She loves you, but she's, she thinks she's a little dog. She's not a little dog.
She's not big either, though. Like,
she's not Rocky, a lap dog, though.
Not really. I mean, more so than Rocky. Rocky's like 90 pounds. She's like 40-ish.
But when you're sitting with your laptop trying to do work,
That's why I got the TV trade table right there. Because holy shit.
Those are the pictures I get of her standing like on your laptop. And just like
she's trying to close it.
Face.
On Friday, she's sitting there trying to close it. I'm like, really?
Yeah. Kelly told me because she was.
Daddy's trying to work, baby.
I need to work. We need to make money to keep. It's the way I look at our cash.
She's a good girl. She just wants love.
But you asked a good question, Dan, about other points of time or items in time that might have more so led to WCW's death that we don't really talk about too much. I think it's hard to really quantify that sometimes. Just looking at like the Vince Russo era as a whole, it's like,
there were so many things.
It really were.
There were so many times I just sat there and I'm like, what am I watching? And it was, like Oklahoma getting brought in. I mean, we all knew it was Jim Ross. They were making fun of Jim Ross. And it was just like, but why? Like, he's on your competitor's show. If people want to watch him, they're going to watch him. It was just so many moments where it was just like.
Well, another thing that didn't help that we didn't talk about is obviously this is a little bit earlier, but when Raw especially was still being taped, they'd give away give away Raw, and then one night they decided to do it again because they think people don't apparently like one of their former talents, ironically enough, and Mick Foley, Mankind at the time, and people left in droves to watch him with his first world championship on TV.
That'll put butts in the seats.
Yeah. Yep.
Sure did.
That was like a double whammy, huh?
Well,
the thing about that same night as the
that was like not only did you step on the rake and it hit you in the face, and then bounced back up and like cut you in the nuts.
No, it was literally sideshow. Sideshow.
I was just gonna say the same thing. Right when she said that,
sideshow stepping on rakes after rake after rake. Yeah, exactly. That was WCW in a nutshell for about 3 years.
You know what's funny about that night is when Austin came out to help Mick win the title, it was one of the loudest pops of the last X amount of years at that point, especially. Yeah. Even now, it's still a loud pop.
Yeah, and I was in fucking Worcester.
Yep.
And I wasn't there. That is.
Well, hey man, at least if you were watching WCW, at least Eric Bischoff told you to change the channel.
Well, I had already know. They had already announced it. They had already announced it previously on the website, so those fans knew exactly what was happening going into that show.
Yep.
At least the people that were looking up online. The other people, they had no idea. But that was in Worcester. I am. As far as regrets is concerned, that's up there. Like as far as wrestling and going to sporting events and that type of stuff, that's up there of missing out, because that is like one of the most talked about moments in televised wrestling history. It was in my hometown and I wasn't even there. But I make the argument, my parents still love me, because they got me WCW NWO Revenge for Christmas. So it's like,
yeet.
Yeah. It's like, how can you be mad? Like, it's like, well, I didn't get WCW. I didn't get a chance to go to the show, but I got revenge out of it. This is one of the best video games ever. Yeet. So, take it while you can. But the interesting part about when the sale happened and when Jamie Kilner, who Steph has pretty much convinced us it was if there was three wise men or three unwise men that led to the death of WCW for her, it would be Nick Patrick, the referee from Starrcade 97, Vince Russo, and Jamie Kilner.
He's the one who put the final nail in the coffin.
Also, the creator of the CW network. I believe the WB network. So we have him to thank for Dawson's Creek and Seventh Heaven and a few other, probably, I don't know if he was involved in Gilmore Girls. I don't know. Because I don't know when that fucking show came out. But at least Seventh Heaven and fucking shitty Dawson's Creek. So he's coming in now to run Turner Networks. WCW doesn't fit in his portfolio. WCW had already been sold at this point to Fusient Media, headed up by Eric Bischoff and a few others. And he just said, fuck this, we're done. And canceled them on Turner Networks, which kind of led to everything in the demise the way it did. Here's an interesting fact, people. On January 1st, 2001, there were 3 major wrestling companies in the United States that had TV and pay-per-view distribution. By April 1st, 2001, there was only one entity left because WCW was absorbed by WWE, but then you had ECW declare bankruptcy around the same time. So that didn't get discussed. That didn't get brought up. That didn't even get mentioned when they talked about the Alliance when that came in, because if you remember, the Alliance became what was left of WCW and what was left of ECW. That didn't even get mentioned, that ECW was involved in that chain, because they talked about all the people that had lost their jobs and production people, the guys that were there for years, which that was tough to watch. That was tough to also realize, guys like Neil Pruitt. Neil Pruitt was actually the guy who created the NWO logo. And was a big proponent for a lot of those promo work that those guys were doing. The black and white shots, everything was going to be kind of like Pulp Fiction style, the way it was set up. Quick sound bites, quick cuts. But I don't think Steph knows this, because I don't think Steph really has a... I have to kind of get her more into an ECW explanation on what a revolutionary company that it was, because ECW went under when they were probably at their most profitable. And also they had more people attending their shows, and their buy rates were actually higher than WCW's in 99 at certain points in 2000, which is astonishing to think about. When ECW went under, they were actually the number 2 promotion in pro wrestling behind WWE. As far as metrics are concerned, as far as attendance is concerned, as far as pay-per-view buy rates is concerned, ECW had the edge, and they were.
But wait, what's ECW now? Like, there's so many. What's going on? What is that?
Hey, what Extreme the fuck is Championship. ECW is Extreme Championship Wrestling.
And when did this happen?
They were in business between 1993 and 2001.
So they were going on during this whole WCW, WWE crap?
Correct. They did not have a major network behind them, though. They were in syndication. They did have pay-per-view distribution. They did do touring. Do you know Paul Heyman, who is behind Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, who's their manager, their wise man?
Yeah.
He was the owner of ECW. And they were probably, in my opinion, the most influential independent promotion in the history of the industry.
So it's pretty much just like all these worlds are just one now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's hard. Oh, you know what? It makes it easier for people like me because, like, there's just too many W's going on, and I can't keep track.
I don't know if you'd like ECW. There are probably some things that you might like about it. A lot more blood. It's a very kind of, it's a hardcore wrestling promotion. meaning that at moments you're going to get like really good technical wrestling in one match, and then the next match somebody's probably getting put through a fucking flaming table.
Honey, I don't like any of the wrestling, so like it's fine.
What about storylines? What about like?
No, absolutely not. What was the one that you told me the other day with the evil Undertaker and the good Undertaker storyline?
Yes,
No.
yes, Undertaker versus Undertaker. SummerSlam '94.
The storylines are horrible. Like I said, I'm like, didn't like somebody's wife get kidnapped at some point?
That's happened a few times.
I was gonna say, which time?
Didn't Vince get blown up in a limo or some shit?
Yes, he did.
The story. Then this is why you cannot make fun of anything I watch again because what the fuck?
They had to end the limo angle though because Chris Benoit died.
Oh god!
They had to end that angle short. They were just like, "Oh, we can't do this out."
Yeah. So I mean, asking me,
one of our guys really died. We can't do this.
The storylines.
Yes.
That's the worst part of it, in my opinion.
Well, ECW had an interesting storyline that maybe you'll like this. So they had this character called Raven, and he was kind of a he was kind of like a grunge, kind of like Gen Xers that more or less was just like blamed everybody for society. So he was just like this kind of like social outcast. And he got into this feud with Tommy Dreamer, who was like this beloved babyface. So they fought for 2.5 years where Tommy Dreamer could not beat Raven for 2.5 years. Every time he'd be in a match and he would get close, he'd somehow fuck it up. But there was other side angles that were going on at the same time, like side missions. And one involved a girl that liked Tommy Dreamer. So Raven and Tommy Dreamer went to summer camp. And this girl liked Tommy Dreamer at summer camp. And she was like this fat girl. What?
You mean like they like went to summer camp as kids?
Yes.
Together?
Yes.
Okay, so they weren't currently as their adult selves going to summer camp.
No, they were kids. They were kids going to summer camp.
Because you know what? It wouldn't shock me.
I know, right?
If that was so okay.
Raven and Tommy Dreamer went to summer camp together. Raven was, of course, the unpopular, awkward kid, kind of the loner of the group. Nobody really liked him, wasn't popular. Dreamer was the popular jock. Everybody liked him. There was this girl that liked Tommy Dreamer. She was fat and had acne. And at the time, remember. And then all of a sudden, Raven, to get back at Dreamer, brings this girl to be his valet. And now she's like a legitimate penthouse playmate. And thank you. And so they work this angle where Tommy Dreamer and Raven are just fighting. And at one point in the storyline, the girl gets pregnant by Tommy Dreamer. And they have to then then this is not over. It was a fake pregnancy angle though, because actually she was having a lesbian relationship with one of Raven's valets.
Yeah, you can stop. I hate it. Like
Up next on MTV's Teen Mom.
I was just rolling my eyes. Like I don't need to hear the rest of that.
You know what they should have done with that entire angle?
Because I'm not booked.
Not booked. Dennis Stamp. Dennis Stamp needed to be a part of that angle.
Yes.
Just comes out and he's just like, I'm not booked. Not booked.
I'm not booked, but I'm the father.
You know, honey, like, these stories are not helping your case in having me interested in wrestling.
Well, I could talk about the Sandman and Raven feud, which at one point
Do I really want to know? Do I
The
care?
Sandman, the Raven at one point had taken control over Sandman's wife and kid, and had somehow he became almost like a cult leader, like it was Jim Jones, and had somehow turned.
What?
Yes, honey, I'm not. This is exactly what happened. He became he became.
Stop it. You were never allowed to make fun of anything I watch ever again.
Hey, what the fuck is that? Like, what is that?
Oh, God.
Raven becomes Jim Jones.
Like,
And turns Sandman's kid and wife against him.
It's just all so fucking ridiculous. I don't understand.
Quote the Raven nevermore.
Jesus. Yeah, guys, wrestling is really cool. I love it. It's just riveting. It is fucking riveting.
Shut up, bitches.
I feel like if we ever get big, if we ever get a Patreon or something like that, if we ever do that, that has to be an option where Stephanie has to view the Raven and Tommy Dreamer storyline, or the Raven and Sandman storyline.
If you let me say
back,
whatever I
cover
want,
to cover.
if I'm allowed to say what I want,
you can say whatever you want.
sure. 'Cause fuck, man, I stumble on this one because I gotta stop my mouth. I gotta stop my mouth.
You know, I wouldn't say you stumbled. I'm just saying you're looking at it. Your outside ear eyes peering in, and we're talking about stuff that we lived, stuff that we've kind of
Yeah,
hold
but like
sacred.
you know, I sometimes have to stop myself from saying like my initial thought, and maybe
I don't
reword
think so.
it.
You're like that actor on The Simpsons who gets swept away in the radioactive material. The goggles, they do nothing.
I have to go on mute. All right, what are you talking about? What are we even talking about now?
What the fuck is that?
Because everything has just gotten ridiculous.
I guess we can. Is there anything else anybody has like moments wise of WCW that you were just like, you gotta be like, is there anything over the top that you saw from these episodes that you were just like, that you want to address? Be like, are you fucking kidding me? How'd this even happen?
I'm still very angry about the fucking referee.
Yeah, I know. That's your big sticking point.
Because it 3 seconds. 3 fucking
A year and a half.
Oh, you had to do
I will tell you this. That still happens.
If someone ruined something that I took a year and a half to fucking develop,
still happens,
and they ruined it in 3 fucking seconds. What did I want to strangle that person?
We actually reviewed Money in the Bank on the shoot this week, and one of the matches they did it again, where either the referee was supposed to stop counting, which he did, whether that be because of the entrance music was supposed to hit earlier for Drew McIntyre to come out and interfere and cash in his Money in the Bank, or whether that was Damian Priest who should have kicked out during that. We don't know, but yeah, a botched pin still definitely happens. Happened a couple months ago in that Jade Cargill match because apparently she wasn't legal, and that looked awful.
Yeah, and now they have better communication. Though they have the headsets, each one of them.
Yeah, all the referees have the earpieces too.
Like it shouldn't happen now. Back in 1997, I can understand. Like, because it's really you're.
Yes,
I mean, even if you watch Barely Legal ECW, you watched a 3-way match between Sandman, Stevie Richards, and Terry Funk. There's a point where Todd Gordon is running around the ring like a jackrabbit, being like, "You gotta go home! You gotta go home! We got 8 minutes left." doesn't happen now because of headsets and people are you're able to communicate immediately with talent. Through the referee, and that that happening now is like, why is this happening now? Like, this shouldn't be happening in 2024. There should be another way that, like, there's ways you can do that to not make it look so to the audience, because everybody looked at it and was just like, well, Rollins is champion. Like, he should be champion right now.
Yeah. You see it a lot, and I feel like this plays into the WWE style that we always kind of talk about in different promotions, having different styles. But anytime you see both guys go down and the referee goes in to check on them, they're also giving them a time check.
Yes.
You know, it's clear that there's more than, are you good? It's clear. And I think that, you know, again, like looking at the instances where this happens in WWE, you could say, okay, well, it's few and far between, but it still happens. It still happens. Somebody misses the cue. Go ahead.
It's funny that, speaking of time check.
Yep.
Because we didn't talk, because they should have mentioned this. They didn't. The fiasco with Halloween Havoc 98, that ran long. And people got the cutoff right when the main event happened between DDP and our Goldberg.
Yep.
So, like, right when that started, that's when the feed cut. So they had to give away the match for free on television the next night as a make good.
As a make good, yeah.
And so that was another incident that I'm surprised they didn't talk about. Because
that was a WCW thing?
Yep.
Yes, they
Oh,
ran
yeah,
the show.
that's a big blunder.
They ran the show too long, where they got to the main event, the feed cut off, and people didn't find out the finish until the next day. So, like that, because we talk about time cues and all that stuff, and that just all of a sudden my memory got triggered. I'm like, oh shit, I remember that. They fucked up that time. That now that I think about it, because that happened around in October of '98. That was just when that was when the acceleration button I felt like pushed that moment on, where it was just a steep decline at that point. I don't remember anything really good happening in WCW after that. That was also the same night, I think, Warrior and Hogan had their rematch. Oh!
I mean, yeah, we didn't really talk about that, not that specifically, but even some of the booking decisions going into those last few years, you would have some of these pay-per-view cards that had maybe, on paper at least, like one or two good matches, and that was it. You know, you had a decent mid-card going into those last few years until, like I said, you had a lot of people jumping ship. And after a while, it's like, because all these people are jumping ship, it affects the mid-card, and then the matches were just nowhere near as good as what they were.
It was very challenging. I think the last Starrcade, which turned out to be one of the worst, the main event
Starlight Express! Starlight Express! Starlight Express!
Cornbread.
Sorry.
Cornbread.
I had to do it. It just came out.
The last Starrcade was Scott Steiner versus Sid Vicious in the main event, and I'm just like, yeah, that's not something I want to fucking pay money for. Like, that has to be the weakest main event in that event's history, without question. Because it's just that, you think of Starrcade, that is WCW's main. That's their WrestleMania. And you think about the last couple of years before that, 96, Piper Hogan. Like 97, Sting Hogan. 98, Nash Goldberg. 99, Bret Hart Goldberg. 2000, Scott Steiner and Sid Vicious. And then I think the last real memorable WCW pay-per-view moment was when Sting broke his leg at Sin.
It's sad that we're saying that.
We will not show that video here. I do not want Steph to get I do not want to get accused of of grossing stuff out with that picture.
I mean, what the fuck is that?
Oof.
I'm good. I don't.
Talk about mismanagement too, of just going up to Sid and be like, "Can you do a big boot off the second rope?" It's like, what?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
The fuck?
Can you land on one leg from the second rope? No.
Can you?
I've barely left my feet in my career, and you want me to do that?
Who ran?
And he did it, and yeah, he broke his tibia and fibia.
No.
Yeah, at the same time. Oh, it was bad. Like, the visual of it was, and then they pinned him. They had to pin him for Scott Steiner to win that main event. Like, oh god, he must have just been excruciating pain. Like, my leg's broken, and I still got to do the finish. Come on, there are other people in this match. Why do I gotta lose? But it's funny that we mentioned, because I completely forgot about that Halloween Havoc thing, and now I'm just like, yeah, I think that was like the first time I remember that nothing good happened after that. It was well, the main event was good between DDP and Goldberg, but I felt like after that event, it was like nothing good came after that.
Even that main event, I mean, was good for what it was, but I mean, I remember watching some of the docus about it, and it's just like, he still had no idea what the hell he was doing even at that point.
Of course not. No, he never did. Like, and that was part of the problem. And I think that in the end,
it doesn't even matter.
Who ran?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry.
At least that's WWE's legacy. It's like, in the end, it didn't really matter. You know, it's like, history is written by the winners.
My impulses are winning right now, so.
It was, I am happy in the end that Steph, though, is a fan of Eric Bischoff, and also realizes that if Bischoff may have had a small percentage in killing the company, so to speak, maybe, with some of the decisions he made.
But they were just wrong decisions. His main intention was to build and try to make this a great, humongous, awesome company.
And he did.
That was his intentions.
And in the end, I've always considered him, if there's a Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling people that have had an impact as far as the growth of television and the growth of moments that they put things together, I would put Vince McMahon up there. I understand why people would scoff at that nowadays, but it's very hard for me to deny his legacy as far as what he has been able to do for the industry. I would put Paul Heyman there. I would put Dusty Rhodes there. And I would put Eric Bischoff there.
Yeah.
I think Bischoff did more to try to make that company not only viable, but also to make it profitable. Ted Turner told him, he's just like, I want this company to turn a profit. If it doesn't, we're shutting her down. And he made it a profitable company, which, you think about it, he had every single thing working against him. An entire organization, an entire portfolio that did not want WCW on their books at all. And he made it a success. And for him to kind of get, and there's people like Meltzer and Alvarez that say that he's delusional by saying that he shouldn't get any of the blame. It should be minimal at best, because WCW wouldn't have been in the position that it became without Eric Bischoff, without him taking and making the right decisions. And Hogan, if he didn't go there, if Hogan did not go there, WCW also wouldn't have been in the position that they were in either. Was Hogan a negative? Yes. but I still say he was far more of a positive than he was a negative, considering the amount of money that he was able to generate for that company and get the eyes on the product. But he was also
Yeah, but if he didn't let his ego get to him, he and Eric could have catapulted that to be something we can't even fathom today. You know what I mean?
I think they did. I just think that they weren't able to effectively sustain that after a while, which is.
But no, I think they would have been able to if Hogan kind of checked his ego and wouldn't mind taking the fall and do what was best for the company and not what was just best for him.
I think personally, and it's kind of, and I look at it with most television shows. I compare it to like The Walking Dead. I compare it to like Game of Thrones, where they had they had this NWO thing had started phenomenal. It was phenomenal television the first 6 months or so. The next 6 months, it was pretty good. Yeah, it was decent. Then the last 6 months, it's like, all right, how the fuck is this ending?
Died on a vine.
It petered out. And you think about it, it is the most single-handedly best storyline that you could possibly have. This thing is making you money. This thing is the reason why the fans are full, why people are having nitro parties at colleges, and all these. That was another thing Bischoff did that they really didn't talk about, of having all these events held on college campuses and getting that strong 18 to 25 male, female demographic. They're coming to the shows. They're having a party, and that caught on with it too. But the NWO was such a huge thing. It's like, do I really want to derail this? Because it's just such a powerful entity. And the argument can be made that the NWO was a bigger entity and a bigger IP than anything WCW would ever produce, and WCW itself. Because you think of what came from it, and you think about it now, where you don't see a lot of people wearing WCW shirts still, but you see a lot of people still wearing NWO shirts.
Yeah.
And that's where you look at the NWO and you look at what Bischoff has done. That was all him. That iconography, that logo, the music, everything can all be attributed to him. And even 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50, 60 years from now, when we're all gone, people will probably still be wearing NWO shirts. There's not a doubt in my mind, because it's just, with the digital age and things of that nature, new people are finding out about it every day. New subscriber to Peacock, they're going on, and they're able to watch chronologically everything that happened. They didn't have to wait a week like we did. God, that was the worst part of it. See you next week on Nitro. Who the fuck's going to turn next week? Who are you guys signing?
But you're right, though. Like, it gives them the opportunity to watch the good, the bad, and the...
Wait, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
It's the truth. And that's one of the benefits, I feel like, despite everything, of Vince buying them. Is he also bought the library with that. But going back to the actual topic at hand, I think it sucks, because I think that the point of Bischoff playing a role in this, and I've mentioned this the last time we talked about this too, it's like, well, if he had such a huge role in it, why did Vince hire him years later?
True.
And I do think he is somewhat culpable, but when you talk about the other guys, whether it be at Turner, like Siegel, or bringing in guys like Russo and having other guys doing the booking and helping Russo, and watching some of the other BS that they put out there, it's really hard to sit there and say that Bischoff is like a top 3 for the blaming for the death of WCW. He's in the top 10, maybe, sure, but he's definitely not in the top 3. Definitely
And
not.
as far as their success, he's in the top 3.
Exactly.
Like, he doesn't belong in the top 3 for killing it. He belongs in the top 10, top 15, maybe.
Absolutely.
But not top 3.
No, not at all.
Like, it's just because you can put every fucking Turner executive ahead of him. Like, just name them.
Yeah.
Just name every fucking one. Brad Siegel,
Yep.
Jamie Kilner, just every one of them. Everyone you could think of that was on that company. Maybe not Ted. But, and Ted is another guy I feel bad for, too, because it's like, Ted deserves his credit. Ted deserves, I think, a Hall of Fame induction. Because...
Speaking of things that will never happen.
Yeah, but I just...
No, I don't disagree with you. I don't.
Yeah,
but...
the impact that he had
Yes.
on being able to keep it, him saying, look, I'm going to keep these guys on as long as I possibly can. He bridged the gap as long as he could. Like, he kept them on that network for as long as he possibly could. And he brought in numerous people to try to figure it out how to run it. Some of them were terrible hires, like Jim Hurd, so to speak, and a few others.
Yep.
But he at least tried and put an effort in to make it work.
Yes.
And he said Bischoff's going to be the last shot. And Bischoff was able to hit home runs when everybody else was just like, how is this even fucking possible? Because they were trying to put a roadblock after roadblock, and he kept just going through them.
Well, to your point, right? Like, he's probably in the top 3 for saving it initially, right? And you could make the argument that without Bischoff, to a lesser extent, obviously without Hogan as well, obviously with this one, but without Bischoff, there's probably no NWO.
No.
And without NWO, I don't think there's nearly as much as a ratings war, or Monday Night War, if you will, as the one that we got.
And Hogan's career would have ended
A lot sooner, probably.
A lot sooner.
Yeah.
A lot sooner. And his pay scale would have went down quite a bit as well. I mean, because that whole thing just breathed new life into the character when it was already waning, and was able to put him at the top of the cards once again. I wish we were old enough to make it to the last Nitro. I've seen the posters, I don't know if you have, where if you could have gone to that show, the last Nitro at Cubla Vila in Panama City, for $30, you could have got you a ticket and all you can drink voucher. Me and you would have been fucking hammered at that show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Completely and utterly hammered.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like,
But I mean, listen, I could have gone to Vegas and got a burger and fries and gone to AEW, so I don't know, man.
That's true. But I'm just saying that, like, me and you, I can see it now. We would have been, like, when Sting and Flair were wrestling, we probably would have been bawling our eyes out. And then when Shame came out, we would have just been taking our empty beer bottles and starting to fucking throw them at him. Like, hey, fuck you, pretty boy!
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, to all that. And it's like, no argument from me. I can't argue that, any of that. I probably would have done it.
Yeah, I know we would have. Like, we would have just been drinking literally all night for that show. And then we would have been pissed because, like, well, I wish Hall and Nash were here. We could drink with them. But they didn't even show up. So we'd be like, oh, great. Just great. Oh, Jeff Jarrett's here? Fucking wonderful.
I mean, what the fuck is that?
But I think we have reached I think we have reached and exhausted all resources. As Steph has come out of the room, and she just gave me the look of, like, I am checked out.
Smoke.
And
Did you?
yes,
But I'm kind of done.
I understand. I feel like which is good. I'm glad.
A lot of talking.
There's a lot of talking. I know, and I feel like that we're we're all in a position now where it's like we've had a lot of fun with this.
I did.
You had fun. I'm glad.
Did. Oh,
So-
please don't hate me.
No, they're not going to hate you. We're going to bring back, we're going to do more Pro Wrestling 101 episodes. We're also going to bring, shut up, bitches. We're also going to bring, and the thing about it is, honey, the last thing that we do is listen to other pro wrestling fans. Like, just how it is. Except our wonderful listeners. What am I talking about? I love you all you people.
That's great.
I'm kidding. Or maybe I'm not. The fact is, though, is that we're trying to explore new things. And I have to give Stephanie the wonderful credit for this idea, for doing this. We're definitely going to do more of these kind of.
I hope you guys like me, and I'll be on more if you do.
I think they like you.
Smoke.
Smoke. To talk about probably more stuff, get her involved and get her more involved with the program and things that we want to be able to do, like Dark Side of the Ring, and get her involved maybe into some of the more corny storylines, like making her watch the Undertaker versus Undertaker feud, or some things from ECW and things of that nature.
Is she trying to shake its head right now, I think?
Yeah, she's trying to shake its head.
Like, no.
Who ran?
Can't coordinate it. Don't try it. No, don't.
No!
Cornbread,
Penguin
damn it,
will
cornbread.
The Penguin is not winning. Penguin is not winning. Penguin is going to rest in peace.
I'm not even going to say what that actually looks like right now. As she throws it at you, right in your fucking
I
face.
got hit in the face. I got hit in the face with a Penguin. So I think this is a good point to close it out tonight. I thank everybody that kind of coming in on very short notice to do this, and being able to create, I think, more wonderful content for not only Pro Wrestling World, but also for the shoot. So, but I wanted to thank everybody. Stephanie, I wanted to thank Mac also for coming in on a Sunday to use time on your weekend to
Love you, Mac.
come up with something. Yeet. Love you, Mac. Love you, Steph. Thanks for coming on. Love you, the listeners. Thank you for listening tonight here on Pro Wrestling World Talks and the shoot on Diamond Podcasting Productions. Again, catch us out on YouTube on Diamond Podcasting Productions for more episodes of the shoot. We upload every week reviewing the best in professional wrestling and also talking about things that bother us quite a bit. And the same thing with Pro Wrestling World Talks. So we'll go from there. And I leave you tonight. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. And thank you, Mac and Steph, for coming in on short notice. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Smoke.